The reality of the Seattle Mariners offseason. Let's talk about it. So as we get deeper into the offseason, we are currently less than 100 days away from Seattle Mariners opening day, and the Seattle Mariners have yet to make an impact move. So as we know by previous offseasons, usually at this point, the Seattle Mariners have made an impact move of some sort, whether that's getting rid of a guy or adding a guy. And the deeper and deeper we get into this offseason and other teams continue to add and subtract from their own rosters, it seems like the Mariners' window of making a trade for an impact player is closing very quickly. And Daniel Kramer, in one of his newsletters, so shout out to the JH page for posting this and making me aware of this, because I did see it on his X and I wanted to talk about it in today's video. But basically, Daniel Kramer came out with a newsletter kind of discussing some of the infield options that the Mariners have been rumored to be discussing this offseason and kind of how their window on them is closing. So first off, we will start with the St. Louis Cardinals, who he discusses in this newsletter, starting with Arenado, who, as we know, has had a no trade clause, but he is willing to go to a certain number of teams in which the Mariners were not listed on that list. One thing that was definitely very fascinating that Kramer brought up in this article is a player that we've briefly discussed on the channel before, and that is Brendan Donovan. He says St. Louis has also shut virtually every door on the Mariners' interest in young second baseman Brendan Donovan. So I wouldn't say that that would come much of a surprise due to the fact that Brendan Donovan really hasn't been on the Mariners' radar. I'm sure they were trying to go after him for some sort, but obviously the Cardinals are going to try to keep on to a young, controllable second baseman of his caliber. And as we previously discussed, the Nolan Arenado contract is way too much for the Seattle Mariners to take on, and for honestly a declining player who's still very good defensively, but his bat is definitely declining, and bringing him over to Seattle will not help that declining bat. So a trade with the St. Louis Cardinals does not seem to be very evident, even though the Mariners have the prospects that the Cardinals want, because as we know, the Cardinals want to get younger and kind of start a little bit of a rebuild in their step back year in 2025. But it does not seem that there are really any players besides Brendan Donovan that the Mariners would really want from the Cardinals anyway. Now moving on to the second team that Daniel Kramer brings up, and that is, as we know, the big rumors recently, and that is the Boston Red Sox. Kramer states that the Mariners have interest in Boston first baseman Tristan Casas, but their admiration of the slugger isn't nearly as high as the Red Sox, a source with knowledge of negotiations told MLB.com. So I can't say that this comes as much of a surprise, because as we know, there has been some debates between Mariners and Red Sox fans and how the Red Sox fans really highly value Tristan Casas as a player, while Mariners fans don't think he's worth Luis Castillo straight up. So to me, it doesn't come as much of a surprise that the Seattle Mariners do not really highly regard Tristan Casas as high as the Red Sox do, especially if they had to give up a starting pitcher just to get him. Obviously, as we know, Tristan Casas has a lot of club control as well. He has a very high ceiling. I think Tristan Casas could be a very good player, and he has had one legit season under his belt to prove that in his rookie year. Last year he was hurt, so he didn't really have enough to highlight to really say what his 2024 season was. But Tristan Casas definitely has a lot of upside. I just do not think that he is worth, especially coming over to Seattle, which is not a hitter's ballpark, to be in a 1-for-1 with Luis Castillo. So I can't say that this came as much of a surprise that the Luis Castillo and Tristan Casas talk has died down a little bit. I think it may get picked up at some point if neither team, if the Red Sox can't get another pitcher and the Mariners really can't get an impact bat, I definitely think the conversation can get sparked up again. But I can see why the Seattle Mariners do not want to do a 1-for-1 with, I think Brian Wu or Bryce Miller was brought up in this conversation. I don't think the Mariners would want to do any of their starting pitchers for Tristan Casas straight up. Now, this next team brought up in the article is definitely one of the more intriguing teams for the Seattle Mariners to go and make a trade with, and that is the Chicago Cubs. So as we know, the Chicago Cubs have been very active this offseason and just acquired one of the biggest names, arguably not even in the market because they had to trade for him, but one of the bigger names in the sport in Kyle Tucker. But Daniel Kramer brings up that Seattle views Chicago second baseman Nico Horner as a strong fit and doesn't see the $23.5 million he's due over the next 2 years as a massive impact to their payroll, according to a source. But as we know, in that Kyle Tucker deal, the Chicago Cubs had to give up third baseman Isaac Paredes, which does mean that they are holding on to Nico Horner a little bit tighter. So this is where things also get a little bit interesting, because the Chicago Cubs have also been rumored to be making a push for Jesus Luzardo from the Miami Marlins. So if the Cubs were to add another arm to their rotation, I believe they would be pretty much done in the starting pitching market, and Luis Castillo to them really wouldn't be as valuable. And with them also getting rid of Cody Bellinger, I do not believe that they probably want to get rid of another position player, which makes another hole that they'd have to fill at second base. But we have previously discussed that Nico Horner would be a great fit in Seattle, especially at the second base position, as well as this gives them a little bit more flexibility to go out and get a free agent like Christian Walker. But especially after hearing these three team connections kind of going downhill for the Seattle Mariners, it does not surprise me that the Seattle Mariners are struggling to make deals this offseason. And unfortunately, this is how it's going to be if they are going to want to improve their roster and are not willing to spend the money to do so. Every team in Major League Baseball knows that the Seattle Mariners have arguably the best starting five in all of baseball, so the first question they're going to bring up when asking for a trade is which one of those guys is available. Also, another plus to MLB teams is almost every single one of these starting pitchers has controllable years, including Luis Castillo, who a team would have for another 3 years on his contract. But that is a huge reason why the Seattle Mariners are struggling to make deals this offseason, is because everyone wants starting pitching and the Mariners really are not willing to give it up. Obviously, they are listening to more phone calls on Luis Castillo, as we know, but they are still probably very hesitant in giving up and making sure if they do give up Luis Castillo that they are getting the right package in return. And other MLB teams also know the Seattle Mariners desperately need help offensively to fill a few holes that they have, especially in their infield. So they're going to be asking for a lot in order to get an infielder that can fill the position. It's not as easy as everyone being like, oh, the Seattle Mariners need help, let's make a trade with them. They're going to want something in return that is valuable, like a starting pitcher. So I would not be surprised if we do not see a Seattle Mariner trade until later this offseason, maybe in end of January, only due to the fact that a lot of teams are looking for MLB-ready talent, not prospects, which the Mariners have a lot of prospects to give up. But unfortunately, there are not many teams that have valuable pieces for the Seattle Mariners that are looking for prospects. But the more time that goes by where the Seattle Mariners do not make a deal with the team, these teams are only going to be getting stronger, and all of a sudden their valuable assets the Mariners have to offer will not be needed because other teams are already filling their holes. Part of me does tell me that the Seattle Mariners are going to probably make a big push for Christian Walker, especially the more the trade market kind of goes downhill in their favor, but I would not have a problem if the Seattle Mariners went out and got Christian Walker while also keeping the starting five intact. As long as the little bit of a long shot, but also very realistic for the Seattle Mariners to really make a big push on Roki Sasaki, I'd be very interested even if they just got Roki and Christian Walker this offseason. Adding a big bat like Christian Walker makes this lineup much better, as well as keeping the best rotation in baseball intact is huge for the Mariners. But like I said, unfortunately, this is something that they're going to have to deal with everyone knowing that they have the best starting pitching in all of baseball, who are also extremely club controlled for the next few years. So I guess it's going to be a waiting game for us Mariners fans. Hopefully we get something before the new year. That would be awesome. But let's see what happens, as it's going to be a long offseason. Please let me know which guys you want the Seattle Mariners to target this offseason, which you think would be the best fit in Seattle. But otherwise, I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.